Vanaerschot has over a decade of experience researching, campaigning, and advocating for economic justice. Frank's work focused on campaigning for a green, democratic, and equitable financial system. Frank has also campaigned to push the European Central Bank and the National Bank of Belgium to stop financing the climate crisis and to align their actions with climate and environmental needs instead. This is Energy News Biz interview series. To support it, please check out our advertising options in the description. Thank you. And now, here's Frank Vanaerschot. Tell me, who is Frank Vanaerschot?
I'm a political scientist. I am currently the director of Counterbalance. We are an European network of NGOs who work on the public investments of the European Union, both inside and outside of the EU. We have members all over Europe. And we work on different issues around climate, energy, human rights, corruption, etc. And we have a vast expertise for 10, 15 years on working on energy infrastructure and projects financed by the EU.
Can you give me an intro on European Investment Bank and its role in the current hydrogen investments?
Okay. So the European Investment Bank, it's actually like the biggest multilateral development bank in the world. That means that's a public investment bank that is owned by several countries together. And it has to a very large extent, because for all the financing it does inside of the European Union, but also for operations it does outside of the EU. It has been created actually in 1958, so not so long after the creation of the EU. And yeah, it's been used for all types of infrastructure projects and energy. It's the second largest or third largest sector for all its investments. It does about, up to date, it has a balance sheet of more than 500 billion euros, and it gives 60-70 billion euros per year. And of this, like 10 or 11 billion, it's outside of the European Union. And why is the hydrogen sector it's important for the European Investment Bank? Well, the European Investment Bank typically was always a bank which financed a lot of fossil fuel infrastructure. And in 2019, it was the first bank of its kind to announce a ban on all direct fossil fuel investment projects. And then it had an update of its energy policy in last year. And we were very concerned what would happen, because it was in the middle of the energy crisis. And as you know, during the energy crisis, on the one hand, there was a big push towards renewables. And on the other hand, also there were really a lot of new gas projects. And we were afraid that the EIB would start again to finance gas projects. And this didn't happen. But when it reviewed its energy investment policy, where there was a really small opening for hydrogen projects before, this became a lot bigger actually. And what we see is that even though they say that they say that they're really focused on they don't say green or renewable, but they say low carbon hydrogen. And you can see that they really leave the door open for all type of low carbon hydrogen projects, but which can involve really a lot of involvement of the fossil fuel sector and infrastructure, which will probably not be renewable hydrogen and prolongs the life of fossil infrastructure that we don't need. And I can go a bit more in detail of why we are of this opinion, but maybe I go already into too much detail.
This EIB policy including fossil fuels in hydrogen projects, does it undermine green hydrogen goals that are set?
I think there's two things here. I think we really have to start from the basis that what we think it's important to do is the renewable hydrogen projects where we really know, okay, in this case, this is the most efficient thing to do. It is not the best thing. It's very difficult or impossible to do direct electrification, and going for green hydrogen is an efficient option here. And the hydrogen goals that you mentioned, and which the EIB policy also says that it wants to help the EU with reaching these targets are very high. And now even the industry players are saying this themselves. They say that, okay, these hydrogen targets we are trying to do this, but the market is so underdeveloped, both in offer and demand. The targets, they're really too high. And what the
Yes.
EIB we see is, okay, you have all these possibilities to do still fossil fuel, still do fossil hydrogen. And we also think that what is problematic is that with such high targets, because the market doesn't really exist, you have to subsidize on both sides. And of course, we know that the commercial players on which the EU relies to create this demand and the offer, they will do the projects if they think they are profitable enough. And then since we think they're too high for what are reasonably interesting uses of hydrogen, what will happen? You will use a lot of public resources to seduce companies and investors to do projects, which some of them will maybe be useful, and some of them are not the most useful thing to do. And either, in spite of subsidies, maybe they don't happen, or maybe the projects will just not be developed because they're not being seen as useful or interesting enough.
So the move of the AIB to support private companies with public funds, can this potentially distort the market dynamics?
Well, of course, if you look at it from a pure market logic, the public support will, of course, distort the market dynamic. But the reality is that the market itself will not come up with the solutions. We are already in this situation. The question is more about public support and regulatory and all this kind of support. It will anyways be needed. But the question is, for which solutions do we want to put how much support, and who will benefit really from this public support? Will it be mostly the companies that are already making a lot of money, or are we sure that, or are we want to see also that the way this public money is being deployed, that it's also like that there is a kind of social justice dimension to it, that the society really reaps the benefits of how this money is being spent? These are the two questions that are relevant on this level, I think.
So how is funding allocated in this case in the hydrogen sector, and who decides recipients?
You mean now for the EIB?
Yeah.
Well, it's in terms of the EIB. It's if somebody wants to do a project, the company has to go to the EIB and say, like, okay, this is our proposal, this is what we want to do, and then they will assess the project according to their own policies. And if they think that the policy is that the project is viable and interesting, then they will support it.
Is there lobbying? Are there any favorites?
We see that you don't have so much view on the direct lobby activities of the EIB itself, but if you look more into what on the EU level is happening, for example, you have the project of common interest. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's the list of projects was chosen recently, and there were 68 hydrogen projects that were passed, and all of them were from fossil fuel companies who proposed them. So yes, it's clear that there is a lobby behind it. Also, if you see, you have another group, Hydrogen Europe, where you see on the one hand a lot of fossil fuel actors, but also a lot of other big industry companies who are in this group, and they defend the promotion of hydrogen. So yes, as in many other sectors, the corporate lobby is quite active on this field.
Elaborate on Hydrogen Europe a little bit.
Well, so from I don't know by heart all what they do, but from what I see is that they have a quite influential role. They're also mentioned, you see, in the different policies. Also, the EIB, you see that they have the role for Hydrogen Europe. And what you see is that they really push, like, okay, to have their companies' interests defended. So you see, okay, hydrogen must be important solution. It's important that okay, green hydrogen, but also the low carbon hydrogen. There must be a big place for this, and that's why it's one of the reasons that we see why you see also this opening still for what is not really renewable hydrogen, and where fossil infrastructure can still be supported. And this, I think, we can see both in the investment policy of the EIB with the opening to low carbon hydrogen, and also on the PCI list, where almost all of the projects are proposed by fossil fuel players, and the big majority of the projects are not exclusively for green hydrogen. And I think here's a real danger, because we are today at a moment where it's really crucial that, like, the way in which we invest now will create path dependency. We are now investing for the coming decades.
Yes.
And I think, like, the really important message, because I think that your audience, there are many people who are, I think, in favor of hydrogen. And what our message is not that we are against hydrogen as such. We are saying, like, we have to be careful to what extent we're going to push this. Hydrogen is a part of the solution, we think, but it's only a small part. It's not a silver bullet. And that's why we have to be really careful how much public money we're going to pump into this, because this public money maybe we need it for a big part of this public money for something else. And we also say this, and that's why we focus so much on this, why this lobby interest, etc. It's important to take into account. It's because we know that the fossil sector, they know that sooner or later the fossil activities will have to fall. I don't know what's going to be the outcome of the COP, but today, on this year's COP, the idea is how we're going to reduce the fossil fuels. It's the first time this is so explicit on the agenda. I don't know what's coming out of it, but we know that this is the direction in which we have to go. And so the fossil fuel industry is thinking about, okay, we try to prolong the life of the fossil fuels, but after this, which activities are the most suitable for us to keep our business afloat? And that's why they have a real interest to have infrastructure which can go to green hydrogen, but can also, if that's not the best thing, keep on using gas. That's why there are so many proposals for projects which consist of pipelines, etc., which are called, like, hydrogen-ready pipelines. But it's very well possible, given the situation we're today, that gas will flow through it. And the main question is about, in the situation we are in today, how are we going to allocate the capital? And what we are saying is, for sure, these companies that are in Hydrogen Europe, they have expertise. They're very smart people. I'm 100% sure of this. However, the only thing that we have to ask ourselves is, there are also other interests, and we have to be able to look with a really open view how we are going to transform the economy to become compatible with the limits of the planet. And we think green renewable hydrogen has a certain role to play in it, but we have to look at many other things, and quite a lot of the public money now being allocated to hydrogen can have much more interesting purposes.
Tell me, what are EIB's investments outside Europe?
Okay, in its investments outside Europe, they invest in different sectors. They invest in it's development finance. It's a combination of energy, you have connection, transport, agriculture, many different sectors. But what is interesting for our conversation today is that what you see, for example, in Global Gateway, which is like the new external investment strategy of the European Union, where the EIB plays a significant role. But these are like it's early stages, these projects. But for example, we saw from the list that exists today, we saw 10 projects around hydrogen. And an important one is, for example, in Namibia, where the idea is to produce a lot of renewable energy, and with this renewable energy, produce hydrogen and then ship at least a big amount of this hydrogen to Europe. Why to do it this way? It's because the creation of green hydrogen is it's much cheaper in many countries outside of Europe. It's much cheaper outside of Europe than inside of Europe. However, you also have there's many other issues involved. There's some technical issues of efficiency, like the process you have to do to convert the hydrogen to make sure that you can ship it. Then it comes, you have to convert it again, then you can use it. You use a lot of energy.
Yeah.
There's also risk of leaks, pollutions, etc. in the process itself. This is one element. Then the other element is on the local level. To what extent is this going to help with development purposes? Because the purpose of the investments outside of the EU has also purposes to do actually like to help with development for these countries and local areas. And if you take a country like Namibia, they have a lot of energy poverty, and it's like will the population benefit from the production of the renewable energy that will be made there or not? This is highly questionable. From what we see, it's not really clear. Then in the elaboration of the project, the companies that are being mentioned, they're mostly there's like a hyphen, which is a German company. There's Hydrogène de France, French companies which are being mentioned. Are these companies like, what's going to be the role? Will they transfer the technology to people and companies in Namibia, or what are the jobs? Is this really going to benefit the economy in Namibia? These are all open questions to which there are no clear answers. And this is why we ask this question, like, okay, is this development? Are you going to help Namibia to develop, or is your main purpose to make use of the fact that the hydrogen is cheaper to produce there, and you extract it to have it in Europe?
Can you elaborate on Hydrogen Bank a little bit?
So yeah, what the Hydrogen Bank is doing, it's giving subsidies to both for both the offer and the demand for hydrogen, with the goal of reaching the quota of the hydrogen targets. And there it's a bit similar to what we say on the EIB. It's that, of course, since there's no really a market for this today, because the green hydrogen is a very small is a very small amount of what exists today. But is this way of subsidizing the private sector, is this really an effective and efficient way of developing developing these activities, and will this lead to social outcomes? It's also why I gave an example. It's like this hydrogen bank. It was created. The idea is already from months ago, but recently, I think like 1 or 2 months ago, several of the companies, but which are companies, for example, Engie, which is a French company, but which also has a big presence, is dominant in the energy sector in Belgium, for example, and is part of different hydrogen projects to develop. It rung the alarm bell and saying like, look, it's very difficult to develop these hydrogen projects for us. It's for us the business case is really not strong. To reach the hydrogen targets, it's not possible actually. This is not reachable in this situation. So if you want to increase the hydrogen production, and it's not even reaching the targets, it's increasing the production, we have to get more public money. However, what's important to understand, like Engie is a company that makes billions of in profits. So you also see that on the one hand, they are right. It is not really profitable to do it. But if you look at it more from the general interest point of view, it's like, since the sector is not really developing as was hoped by the lobby and those defending the hydrogen sector, is it really such an interesting thing to do to just pump more public money because the private companies and investors who on their own make a lot of money don't find it interesting enough to invest in?
Why are Ukrainian hydrogen projects listed as a common interest?
There's a big possibility there to create the green energy. Also, like not alone because they have a lot of available space to do it, but also because a lot of the minerals needed for their production. Something that is interesting to see, and this is not only on the hydrogen production itself, but also for the minerals. In already, I don't remember, it was December 2022 or January 23, but around this time, really in the middle height of the war, the European Union, together with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, they signed a memorandum on the extraction and development of critical raw materials for the energy transition for the EU. And this was like a bit on the same time, because we know we were in contact with like NGOs working on the green that want really a green reconstruction in Ukraine, and they were saying like this is strange because on the one hand all the talks, and now of course we are already months further, all the talks of like helping for the reconstruction, for the potential integration into the European Union, etc. This is stalling. This is like not really going forward. But the EU is already signing this kind of memorandum together with the Ukrainian government and the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development and EU to develop these critical raw materials. So it's important to see that, yes, in the height of war, these kind of business deals are also being discussed. Yes, and it also shows that the EU is of course on the side of Ukrainians as well. Like this is for sure part of it, but it's also looking at its own geopolitical interests there. Yeah. So you can see this PCI project in the same way of operating the politics and business.
Is the EU's hydrogen finance strategy overlooking social and environmental considerations, risking long-term consequences?
Yes, I think so. And this goes back actually to this more general background argument I was making, where we are saying like it's about the which kind of activities you want to develop, what is the most what are the effective solutions we can develop to decarbonize the economy, and how do you do this in a social way? And what we are saying is what is a bit problematic with the way in which EIB and other instruments of the EU, that's why I gave you this list of the project common interest, to put numbers on this, the project of common interest. There's this 68 hydrogen projects, all of them proposed by the fossil fuel sector. And important to understand, this is companies like RWE, Shell, etc. These companies, almost none of these companies have a business model that even remotely goes to decarbonization. They almost all of their business is still oil and gas. Yes, they have some renewable projects, some of this, but this is really the green projects in this company is really small amount of what they're doing. The only real transition that is happening in these companies is a transition from reinvesting almost all of their, not almost all, but a much larger part of their profits into capital expenditure in real activities, mostly oil and gas, towards a much bigger part of their profits being paid to the shareholders in terms of dividends and with other techniques to increase the financial profitability of these companies, which is actually meaning like these companies which propose a lot of these hydrogen projects, they're very polluting and they're not willing to put the money that they make to contribute to helping with climate change. And these are the companies that are now on. These are the companies and whose hydrogen projects are now on the priority list for big European projects, and that can also receive a lot of taxpayer money through different European instruments. And if you look at like from these 68 projects, we know about 2/3 of them, we know what the costs are, and the costs are estimated to be around, if you put like the construction plus the operating costs, it amounts to, but these are estimations, but it amounts to around 70 billion euro. If you would estimate that the same costs would apply to the projects for which no numbers are given, then you would have 100 billion cost for these projects. This is a very big amount of money. This is really a really big amount of money. Then we know that this is all projects that are for pipelines, storage, transport of hydrogen. But most of them are not really related to green hydrogen projects.
Yeah.
This is what we have here is a really big amount of projects operated by energy companies who are not willing to go for a transition. And many of these projects, they are not really renewable hydrogen related. And then we say, okay, in any case, whatever we do, because you asked a bit before this question on is there market distortion with the public money? Yes, there is market distortion, but also this is necessary because the market is not doing the decarbonization that we need. If there is such a big amount of public money being invested in projects that are not clearly going in a direction that we need it to go, and that will benefit a lot companies that make a lot of money and are not willing to go in the direction that we need to go, this is problematic both on the social aspect and on the environmental prospect. And that we say is that no, what we should do is really look at the transition in a different way. Really look much more like, okay, leave some of the business interests behind, really look at more, okay, if they have technical expertise, that can be interesting. Of course, we need the technical expertise they have, but we really need to look with an open view for the society, what are with the technologies that we know that are available, that can we reasonably think will be developed, what are all the options that we have, and where we think that electrification is a lot of the times much more important to do. And we know it will have less business opportunities, but for the fossil fuel sector, but this cannot be our primary concern if we want to make the economy less polluting. That's we have to look beyond these interests, and we think that this is really required if we want to transform the economy in a social way and within the limits of the environment.
Do you think that there is awareness that the transition will not be able to materialize without these companies still, but something needs to happen to change their direction?
That's a very good question, actually, because I'm really thinking, speaking very openly about it. I think you have there's different camps on this, of course, and you have probably the ones that say, "Oh, we have to go with them because they're the main energy players, and anyways, we have to work with them, and we look at them to provide the solution." And I think what the government and policy strategy that this is going quite a lot in this direction. Do you have others who say no? These companies have to go. They have to go away. The really difficult thing is to accept. Okay, the reality is that they are here. They have a lot of power. They have a lot of expertise, and I think that the really difficult thing to do is how can we use the expertise that exists in these companies with all also like all the workers. They know a lot about it. They would be able to develop also other solutions and technologies for sure. But how do we do this in a way that does not that can go beyond what the owners of these and of these companies, the way in which they are defending their interests? Because this is not really going in the direction that we needed to go. To dissociate this, that's really a challenge, and I think it's a challenge where it both needs a very different approach from government to look at a much more assertive way at the transformation of the economy and its role. It's very important to understand, like, when I said this thing before of like, yes, there is market distortion because the market is not doing itself. And on the other hand, we fully said, okay, we have the European Green Deal, etc. We need to decarbonize the economy. This is a must. We know it. It's really to say like, okay, for all these, to meet all these challenges, and there's others. We're talking now about climate, of course, but we know we have this concept of the poly crisis, all the different crises that are impacting our society. The public support for the economy is becoming larger and larger. And it's also a tool that we, like the industry, uses this and says, yeah, we can do this for you and we can do this for you, but you have to give us the money. But it's also for both for governments and also for citizens and civil society. It's so important to realize that the market players are the ones that are very powerful, but they also need the public money. That is the money that comes from taxpayers. That is what we pay with our work. So we have a really a democratic right to decide what is going to happen with this money. And our money is needed. These powerful players need our money. And on this, we have to develop, I think, a much stronger conscience, both in the government level and in the civil society level, that we can also use this. It's a leverage. It's a lever. This lever of the need of public resources and public money. We can use it in many different ways than what is happening right now.
So the citizens are subsidizing these, let's say, unwanted solutions in a way.
Yes, of course. And I don't know so much what is the exactly who is your audience, but it's important to understand that when for example, the European Union, it gives a guarantee or a grant or a loan could be the European Investment Bank, could be European Bank of Reconstruction and Development, etc., or another, or maybe in collaboration with the National Public Bank or with member states, subsidies, grants, etc., loans. That this is public money. That it comes from the money that we pay in our taxes. And even though what in reality is happening in this, it's the people inside these institutions who make a lot of. It's more like a technocratic decisions that are being made of this. And of course, you have people who are nominated by elected governments who are inside these institutions making these decisions, but they're very far away from democratic scrutiny. And so a lot of these decisions are being taken with the money that we pay in taxes, but we don't have decent mechanisms to co-decide about them, to control them. Let me give you the example of the European Investment Bank. All the member states, and we, of course, we elect our national governments, but it's the Minister of Finance. They are inside the bank and they decide on the general strategy of the bank. All the projects are approved by the directors of the bank, and the directors is each government appoints one director, and this is a person who is kind of senior bureaucrat in typically the finance ministry. It can be from another ministry, but often it will be the finance ministry. And then the only really democratic check that is there is that the European Parliament makes reports about the activities of the European Investment Bank, but they are non-binding. So we can write the report. Actually, like last year's report, if the EIB would adopt all of this, it would not be exactly what we want, but it would go in a better direction. But the EIB is not forced at all. There's nothing that obliges the EIB to take it into account. Of course, if there's a lot of pressure, maybe it will do something, maybe not. And this is problematic. We think, no, that we need a lot more democratic accountability in the way in which this institution operates. For example, if you take in Germany, you have the KfW, which is a big public investment bank, and there you have the ministers, parliamentarians are in the supervisory board of the bank, which kind of controls the activities of the bank. There's a business association, but there's labor unions. They're also represented in this bank, and it's not that the labor union can decide on its own what's going to happen in the bank, but they're involved in the decision-making process. And we think that as these public investments for the transition to be both environmentally and socially good, that it's super important that civil society is well represented, that it can have a real impact in how this money is being invested. And we think that for the transition to succeed, this is very important, because what do we see happening today? The European Green Deal was made in 2019, and now there is a lot of backlash against it. There's a lot of political parties who want to slow down the green transition. Part of it is because of industry lobby. Part of it is also because there are a lot of political parties who use the skepsis that exists among citizens in the society about the green transition, that use this skepsis to go against the transition agenda, which will maybe also be against even the hydrogen things that we think are not good, you know. But what is behind this? What is behind so the source is the skepsis of many of people of the transition, in the transition. It's because if you take the electrical car, for example, many people think, but if by 2035 or so I cannot have a diesel or a car anymore, or a combustion engine car anymore, I will never be able to afford an electrical car. All these subsidies for the electrical cars, this is good for a part of the rich and a part of the middle class, but many people below, we cannot afford this. And I think they are right. I am super much in favor of a very strong, profound transformation towards decarbonization of the economy, but I understand the concern of these people. And I don't think it's a solution, as what is happening now a lot, that a lot of political parties are saying, "Oh no, we have to slow down with the green transition. This will make us poor, all of us. It's a bad thing." No, the real thing is we have to find a solution that we are going to use the public resources that we have available in a way that we develop solutions that are good for the environment, but also socially good, which on the level of transport, because I use the example of the electrical vehicles, means maybe it's more important to support the greening of and further development of public and other more modes of shared transport than to change all the combustion engine cars with green cars. This is an example, and you could say, this is a bit disconnected why we are discussing about hydrogen, but it is connected because the approach in which the European Union and the European Investment Bank as well is looking at this hydrogen development is, okay, we have the fossil economy. We need to go away as much as possible from the fossil fuel emissions. And in hydrogen, we see a technological solution, which if we do enough of it, the rest of the way in which the economy functions, we can leave it more or less like it is. And that we say is it's an illusion. We don't believe in it. If you want people to have access to the basic things that you need, then you need a lot of course you need technology, but the basic element is you change how the economy functions. And you have to really think about how do we invest the public money in a way that there's green solutions for all of us.
So listening to these answers, I came to conclusion that governments are those who need to direct the big fossil companies in a different direction, and not vice versa.
Yes, exactly. And this is how to say it, like how you mobilize civil society together with government to really transform these companies, their activities, etc. That's a very, very big, difficult task to perform. And we say,
do you know any example of these companies transforming? Maybe not 100% or at least 30%, let's say.
So the example I would like to give is not directly an energy company, but it's actually a bank, a public bank. There's and it's good because I already talked about that the European Investment Bank was the first big international public bank to stop financing fossil projects. Now, what we think is even a much better example than this is that you have the French public bank Banque Postale, which really decided to stop investing in fossil fuel companies. So let's say this, in companies that still enlarge their fossil fuel activities. They have made a policy a few years ago that stops this, where they actually say like, okay, if you're an energy company and you're still doing, you have to, by now, you cannot do any new fossil fuel projects, and they don't just invent this rule on their own. It's based on the analyses that were made by the International Energy Agency, who said in 2021, by next year we have to stop doing new fossil energy projects because otherwise we cannot reach the 1.5 global warming target, which we decided on in the Paris Climate Summit in 2015. This is what the company has to apply, has to implement directly if it wants to get money from the Banque Postale. Then it says by 2030 you have to phase out. You have to lower and you have to stop the fossil fuel production. Now, it's a very ambitious target, and we know that the fossil fuels will anyways be used longer than 2030. But it's a very good example that there is. It's the Banque Postale. It's a quite big. It's bigger than. It's even bigger than the European Investment Bank. That such a big bank gives this signal saying like, you cannot get money from us if you don't adopt this, which is basically saying like, if you want to get our money, you need to make a credible strategy as an energy company that you are really going out of the fossil fuels. And I think that this is really what we have to do. And for example, it's something that we are pushing a lot, the European Investment Bank, on, that we say like, okay, because the European Investment Bank, they have some criteria for climate, but they are very weak. And we say, no, you use your power, and you have to say to the big energy companies, you will not get any support for us unless you really show a super clear plan that you are going away from the fossil fuels in the speed that is needed to adapt to climate change. And there are many levers. I'm talking about European Investment Bank, but there are many ways in which these companies get subsidies, get public finance, get all kinds of support, and you can use these all as levers. You can use all of this, and there's any of the possible regulatory or public financial mechanisms that we can use to push these countries to go out of the fossil fuels. We have to use them.
Your opinion on International Energy Agency?
The International Energy Agency, of course, it's the first thing to recognize. It's a very important actor in the energy sector and in climate. They have a lot of data. It's also we also use it a lot just to see like what is actually going on, what is the development of the different kinds of energy, where are the investment flows going. So on this level, of course, they are very relevant, and they were quite helpful, even though many other actors from the civil society, academics, and others were saying already a long time before that we have to stop doing new fossil energy projects. But when the International Energy Agency at the end of 21 said we really have to stop these projects, that was, of course, very helpful, because it's a strong voice in the international community. Companies and governments look at this, even though, as we can see in the business models of the fossil industry, they are not really adopting them. But it changes the conversation, of course. So on this level, we think they're really important. Then again, we don't really share the same vision of how to decarbonize and to the economy, and how to go really for a socially and environmentally just transition. But then again, they have it's a relevant actor, of course.
There's data proving that there is about 75 million already invested in lobbying for hydrogen, and that's twice amount of big internet companies lobbying money. So that probably makes a point. What do you think?
Yes, of course. And I didn't know these numbers by heart. I can imagine that they come from a report by Corporate Europe Observatory or so. But I'm not surprised that it's that it's like bigger than some of the other sectors, because they play such a big role in the energy sector, and also because they have such a big interest. They know that what we actually should be doing goes against their business model. So using this money and to influence as much as possible the decision making on how the energy sector should evolve is, yes, of course, that's their interest. I think an example that I think of now is when the invasion in Ukraine started, and there was all the concern, of course, about the access to gas for Europe. One of the first things that the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, did is she created a working group together with the big gas companies, the big private gas companies in Europe, to develop solutions of how to deal with this. So Repower EU was a strategy that came out of it. It was the EU strategy to deal with the the problem of access to gas in the EU in the context of the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and the gas the big gas companies, they were the steering wheel. They had a very big influence in designing what the solution should look like, and the Commission didn't hide anything. I remember, like at the moment when it happened, Ursula von der Leyen wanted to show to the world that she was taking matters into hand, that she was doing doing her work on this, and she made a big tweet showing like, I am now already I'm with the gas companies thinking about the solutions. And that's also why we shouldn't be surprised that in the solutions that come in Repower EU, yes, there is the push to more renewables, but there is also the development of a lot of gas infrastructure. A lot of infrastructure there will be much more gas infrastructure than we actually need, or that is good for the climate. And that's since months already, we see that there is a lot of the production plants will lead to overcapacity of LNG and gas.
What are the differences and similarities between your institution and Corporate Europe Observatory?
I think it's even though we know each other and we have some collaboration. We have a podcast together, actually, like EU Watch Radio. If you want, you can check this out. But what's different is that we look at public investments of the European Union, whereas Corporate Europe Observatory, they really look at what are the lobby activities of multinationals, of big companies towards the EU institutions for regulations, etc. They're linked, of course, because the same companies try to change regulation and also try to get access to the European money, but it's focusing on two different aspects. To give an example, the European Investment Bank, around 60% of its annual lending goes to other financial institutions and corporates, so big companies. So there you see, like, we don't really know there's no really information on the direct lobby activities towards the European Investment Bank, but you can see the result of it.
Thank you for being my guest.
Pleasure.